Diddle-dee. It is Thursday, October 15th. You're listening to Real in the Field Goals, the weekly podcast where Danny Kelly of Field Goals and Kenneth Arthur, also of fieldgoals.com, discuss the Seahawks. And we'll bring a guest on to talk about their upcoming opponent, usually. And this week we've got Will Brinson of CBS Sports, off to a solid start so far. He writes. Everybody knows him because he writes for CBS.com, of course, but he's also from Carolina, so he's going to give us some insight into the Panthers, Cam Newton, and such as the Seahawks try and get back to 500 this weekend in Seattle. As always, Real in the Field Goals is brought to you by the Ballard Agency, an insurance broker in Kirkland, Washington. If you want to go local, if you want to support family businesses, if you have a family business of your own that you need insurance for, call the Ballard Agency at 425-454-3510 and tell them that Field Goals sent you, please. And it was ballardagency.com. Okay, so as we said, the upcoming guest is Will Brinson of CBSSports.com, but we're going to begin talking about the Seahawks. The big news on Thursday, of course, is that Derek Coleman was arrested and taken into custody for a hit-and-run accident. And I don't know how many more details have come out at the time that you listen to this, or even as the time that I say this, from the time that I last heard of it. Danny, I know that the Seahawks have suspended Derek Coleman indefinitely until they find out exactly what happened. Right. What else do you know about this particular incident?
So apparently, obviously, based on the photos of the crash scene, it looked like pretty crazy. Both cars were flipped over. One of them was like up the hill, which I don't even know how that happened, like physically. But sounds like Coleman's agent said that he fell asleep after leaving the Seahawks team meeting, which would, I guess it would make sense that he wasn't as far as we know, there's no indication that he was drunk or anything like that, intoxicated. Mm-hmm. And if he had just left a Seahawks meeting, that would kind of jive with that. I wouldn't think he'd be drinking immediately after leaving that, but you never know. But everything we know so far is that he wasn't drunk. So they're investigating it as potentially he had fallen asleep at the wheel or whatever. And then, the good news is, no one got seriously injured. That I think one of the guy in the other car, or the person in the other car, broke their collarbone, and that was obviously you don't like that, but you don't want serious injuries, and right. It sounds like everyone kind of escaped, potential catastrophe here, especially considering both cars flipped over. So,
if this comes out as being, obviously a non-DUI, if it comes out as being perhaps more that Derek Coleman was irresponsible, more so than actually malicious.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they would say there is a reason why those laws exist. You can't, if you fall asleep at the car and kill someone, they're going to ask you why you fell asleep, why were you driving?
Right.
But, and for Derek Coleman, obviously, he doesn't need to be driving. There are, I'm sure an Uber is within his feasibility of what he can afford. So just from a football standpoint, Derek Coleman has been here for, since 2012. This is a running team. Danny, can you sort of give people an idea how much Coleman's absence would affect the Seahawks this week?
Well, I think the main thing that it would hurt is the special teams performance, because he's been their core special teamer. He's the guy. I think he plays on all special teams plays, and Pete Carroll's talked about him multiple times as being a very core guy, like very important to that. So that's like the number one thing you have to worry about. Obviously, the Seahawks carry two fullbacks, which is extremely rare. But the nice part is that Will Tukuafu can play kind of two or three spots for them. And he'll, in the meantime, I imagine that Coleman probably won't play this week unless, they exonerate him of everything like immediately. So my guess is that this week we'll see Will Tukuafu playing fullback. And the Seahawks have been running more high formation stuff, it feels like, recently, so that he could get quite a bit of playing time. And then they'll have to replace him on special teams. The good news is they have a few days to get someone implemented in for that plan. It's not the last second thing like when Coleman was last year, broke his foot in the pregame warmups. But anyway, obviously it's a disappointing thing, and it's a bummer. Hopefully he doesn't get. Hopefully they find that there's no criminal element to this, but just kind of waiting for more details. to come out. At 2:00 is the press conference for Bellevue Police, so we'll find out more at that point.
Such a weird thing to have a press conference, it seems like, for, I realize that Derek Coleman is a guy on the Seahawks, but unless they're going to make some huge and unforeseen announcement about the details of the accident, it seems weird to have a press conference just for a traffic incident.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, he's a high-profile guy. I think it probably is the reason.
I'm a high-profile guy. I don't want any press conferences.
Right.
I mean, look, me and Danny and Jackson are three of the biggest names in the Seattle area. So that's why we can relate to Derek being so famous. Moving on from this week, you had another article, PFF Signature Stats of the Week, that you're doing every week with Pro Football Focus's Jim Secchi. What do you think this week or this season have you found to be most surprising when going over the PFF numbers? Just some of the examples this week are Seahawks receiving corps had 0 drops on the year with 2% drop rate, which is the second best. Russell Wilson has a minus 4.4 yards per attempt difference with and without play action, up to 8.8 yards per throw without play action. And Thomas Rawls is averaging 2.82 yards after contact per attempt, 11th among running backs. Obviously, Rawls has had a stellar season in these last 3 games, plus some stuff about Atiba Rubin, who I know we talked a lot about in the offseason. What do you think is the most surprising thing you found out this week?
Well, I think the most surprising thing was the difference in play action versus non-play action, because the Seahawks have been a play action team. Pete Carroll, you hear him talk about play pass a lot. That's what he calls play action, the play pass. And that's like an old school term, but yeah. So it's like a huge part of their offense. They really like to do that kind of suck the defense up towards the line of scrimmage, then throw it over their heads behind. I have no real explanation. I'd have to look into that a little bit deeper. I would like to hear what Pete Carroll would say about that as well. But his Russell Wilson's completion rate drops a lot.
Let's get him on the show.
Okay, let's do that.
All right, here's Pete Carroll.
Yeah, his completion rate on play action is 57% versus 73% for non-play action. The one theory that I had for that is, obviously with the protection issues that the Seahawks have had up front, the longer developing plays, play action is obviously a little bit longer developing than just a quick, pass where they're not doing the play action fake or whatever. And so with the amount of pressure that he's faced, perhaps that has a big part of it. Russell Wilson bootlegging out and running a play action fake like that. It's just not worked as well. The defensive ends on opposing teams have done a really good job of kind of keeping him in check on that. And so that could be part of it. So I don't know. That one was interesting to me because I feel like the Seahawks, when I picture the Seahawks offense, it's a play action offense. It's not Peyton Manning sitting back there in the pocket and throwing quick passes. It's Russell Wilson play fake, Russell Wilson read option play fake, bootlegging, things of that nature. And so that one to me was probably the most surprising of all the stats.
Looking around the division as well, you posted this on fieldgoals.com, the film room with Brett Coleman of Battle Red blog, the Texans SB Nation site. It's a video that he looks at as far as the impact that Todd Gurley is having on the Rams offense and how they're able to build an offense around him. And he basically said that, we always said that if the Rams had an average quarterback, they'd be all right. And Nick Foles is pretty much an average quarterback. And I mean, they are 2-3, but they played really well against Green Bay for a time. When you look around at the Rams, 16th in points allowed, 13th in yards allowed, 4th in yards per carry, 10th in net yards per attempt allowed. And then there's some of their other stats, they're not terrible. 22nd in net yards per pass attempt, 20th in rushing yards per carry allowed. But their big Achilles heel is still that, they're 29th in points scored and dead last in total yards. Coleman says, that if they just fix a few mistakes, they could be a playoff team. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the Rams can challenge for the NFC West? They are 2-0 in the division, but they also have lost to the Redskins and Steelers.
Right.
The Steelers being without Ben Roethlisberger for half of that game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not convinced about the Rams, to be honest. They're so inconsistent, and that's a big reason they've kind of been the 8-8 whatever range team for the last several years, is because they can win this big game and then they'll lose some crappy team the next week, and they again, that's happened this year. So I still think they're a really talented team, and I think they can pretty much give anybody a run for their money. Obviously, we saw them beat the Seahawks, and then they beat the Cardinals as well. So, I mean, they definitely have talent. They definitely can give people a run for the money, but I just don't see them this year as a playoff team. I mean, I just haven't, to be totally honest, I haven't really been thinking of them as a playoff team this year. So we'll see if, there's a lot of season left. We'll see if they kind of can clean things up and be more consistent. But, I think they don't look to me like a playoff team quite yet.
Yeah, and we'll find out. We should find out pretty soon. Their next two games, they have a bye week this week, and then they have the Browns and 49ers at home. So, a playoff team would win those games, I'd think. Then they go to Minnesota, a team that, is going to be in the wild card chase all year long, so you want to beat them. And then a home game against the Bears, and then they go at Baltimore. So, you'd think that for the Rams to really take that next step up and prove that they belong, they may go 4-1 in that stretch. But I still think it's very likely that they just go 2-3 because those are the things Rams do. So moving on to this week's opponent for Seattle, the Carolina Panthers, we're going to have Will Brinson of CBSSports.com coming on very shortly. Danny, you pay attention to the NFL as a whole, I believe.
A little bit, yeah.
Have you watched any games besides the Seahawks this year?
I have watched some games besides the Seahawks this year. I haven't watched the Panthers super closely, though, to be honest. I watch Red Zone during the day, during Sunday games, and so you catch them a little bit there. But I haven't done a deep study on Carolina at all this year. So it'll be, I think that you obviously look at their schedule has been a little, easy, or not easy, but underwhelming. It's and obviously Cam Newton's playing really well. So those are the two things that kind of come to mind. It's a little surprising that they're undefeated at this point, to be honest.
Well, if you say you haven't paid a lot of attention, then just call me the bus driver because I'm going to take you to school.
All right. No yelling on the bus.
No yelling. Yeah, you're absolutely right about the schedule. You see a 4-0 record and you go, hey, that's not bad. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay. The Houston Texans. All right. The New Orleans Saints. And I believe that was the Luke McCown game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Okay, so their schedule was easy. Sorry.
It was probably the easiest in the NFL.
Right. Yeah.
And, so they did go, and, they didn't blow any of those people out. They beat the Bucs by 15, but they could have lost some of those games. Some say they may have should have. The big thing is they are fourth in turnovers on offense. So they've only turned the ball over 3 times, and third in turnovers forced, being 11 turnovers forced, including 5 against Jameis Winston and the Bucs. And then I always like to look at quarterbacks faced. It's the most important position. So you're looking at Blake Bortles, who's having a better year this year. Then you're looking at Ryan Mallett, Luke McCown, and Jameis Winston. So I think Russell Wilson's going to be the best quarterback they've faced so far this season. And it's interesting that Cam Newton, let's just go over the numbers. His 55.4% completion percentage is among the lowest in the NFL. But he has 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. His quarterback rating is all right, 88.5. The big thing that everyone will talk about, though, is that his number one receiver is Ted Ginn. And I guess Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen, though, is, at this point catching only 50% of his targets. Ted Ginn, a little under 50%. And their rookie Devin Funchess, who they expected to be the number 2 next to Kelvin Benjamin before he tore his ACL, has been a liability on the field. He has caught 3 of 12 targets for 38 yards. So just give me an overall feeling. Does this game scare you?
It doesn't scare me. I think Seattle should win, and I think they will win. But I do think that the Panthers always seem to play the Seahawks tough. They have a very good defense. The Seahawks, as we know, like to play it kind of slow, and it's always kind of close with the Seahawks. And so I imagine this will be like a, quote, close game. But I think it'll be one of those ones that the Seahawks, control start to finish, if that makes sense. So So no, they don't particularly scare me. I wouldn't use that word. I think I respect them as a team, and I think that obviously the way they've played the Seahawks over the past couple of years, I think you go in, you always know it's going to be kind of a slugfest, and so that's kind of how I'm looking at this game. I do think the Seahawks are more talented and better.
Yeah, the Seahawks are 7-2 all time against the Panthers. They've won the last 5, all of which have come since Pete Carroll joined the team. 3 of those were in Carolina, and the scores are 31-14, 16-12, 12-7, 13-9, and 31-17. I guess you would say that the last 3 times really that they've played the Panthers at home, which would be the 2005 NFC Championship game, a December game in 2010 with Pete Carroll, and then last year's playoff game, a divisional round. They've beaten them basically by an average of 32-15. So at home, they seem to – it's really the close games have been on the road in Carolina, so I might expect them to be better. Do you think that they'll have a hard time defending against Greg Olsen, and how do you feel? How would you grade the Seahawks' ability to defend tight ends this season?
I mean, I think that's the one thing you worry about. Honestly, it's the Seahawks have done really well on throws outside. Obviously, last game there was some issues with pass interference and everything with Kerry Williams, but on the whole, like the outside has been defended pretty well. But the problems so far have been kind of like the middle area of the field, the tight ends, and obviously we saw what Tyler Eifert was able to do last week, and that's kind of concerning just because I think that Olsen's kind of a similar style, like more of a receiver than a tight end, and so that's going to be a challenge for the Seahawks, and that's going to be something they're going to have to adjust to because over like last year they weren't that great against tight ends, and then this year they've been better, but they obviously had that clunker last week, so that's going to be the thing. So you're going to have to watch for Cam Chancellor and KJ Wright in coverage. Those are the 2 kind of main guys that tend to draw coverage on tight ends. And then obviously, like when you're having a zone drop in the middle, it's going to be interesting to see whether KJ or Bobby Wagner is playing. Mm-hmm. He's a lot better probably than Brock Coyle would be, or if potentially maybe they'll move KJ Wright to the middle and then play Kevin Pierre-Louis on the outside. So it's just, with the injury situation for the Seahawks right now and their history kind of defending tight ends, that's kind of the main concern for me. So Greg Olsen is like the number 1 guy to watch.
Cook Lukley is out of concussion protocol. I realized as well when I was making up that funny name, Cook Lukley, his name is basically Luke, and then you flip it around and add a Lee. So it's like Luke, and then it's Luke again, but you just flipped it around and then E. So it's Luke Kuechly. It's like Luke Kuechly. So that's the big news that I just discovered about Luke Kuechly's name, or Kuechly, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. That's probably the biggest thing that I've done bad all episode long is say that his name was Kuechly. It's Kuechly. Right. Hey, guys. Welcome to Real on the Field Goals. I'm your host, Kenneth Arthur. Okay. He is out of concussion protocol. He hasn't played since week 1. Have they said if he's going to play for sure? I guess this is a question we could ask Will Brinson.
Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head. I think he is playing.
It's interesting because, a couple years ago, the debate was who's the best middle linebacker between Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly, and both are questionable to play this week.
Yeah, and he was, obviously he got the Defensive Player of the Year award.
2012's Defensive Rookie of the Year and 2013's Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. I mean, it is a man-made, man-given award, so that doesn't mean he necessarily was the best. A lot of people disagreed with that decision.
Right.
But obviously a phenomenal player.
Yeah, and I think he'll play. He's practicing, so I imagine he'll play this week. And so that's huge for them. Because they've been missing Charles Johnson and Luke Kuechly the last couple of weeks, and so those are probably their 2 best defensive players. That's like losing Michael Bennett and Bobby Wagner. So I mean that's going to be big to get him back, but we'll see. If he's 100% at this point, like he's obviously hasn't practiced for a couple of weeks, so that could have an effect. But I imagine he'll be back in 100% like pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so is Marshawn Lynch is expected to play. I don't know where ProFootballReference.com gets their injury reports. It says that Bobby Wagner is expected to play. He may be listed as probable. Have you heard anything as far as Marcus Burley and Ty Smith?
Marcus Burley, I think, is out. He had surgery on his thumb. He broke his thumb. And then what was the other one?
Ty Smith. I mean, just
Yeah,
cornerback depth.
I think he'll be out as well. That's why they signed Crescent Butler this week. I think that we're a couple of weeks away from Marcus Burley coming back. I don't know what the deal with Ty Smith is. He has a hip issue, which makes me tend to think it will be a longer issue than just a week or two. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think the Seahawks are shorthanded at the cornerback position. Obviously, a running back has been an issue, and then losing Derek Coleman doesn't help. But
yeah,
sounds like Marshawn will be back this week, so that's big time. So yeah, I think that'll be good.
Yeah, the Seahawks have not used their IR with designation to return. I don't know if that'll come into play this season. If it does, they'll have to use it soon, I would think, because it's a minimum 8 weeks, I believe, of being out. So if anyone does get hurt, they can still use that designation. But hopefully they don't have to.
Right.
Injuries do happen. It looks like, and speaking of Lynch coming back, how would you expect or what would you hope to see in terms of the backfield with Lynch, Rawls, and Fred Jackson and the way that they're used this week and upcoming?
I think that Lynch is still going to be the lead guy, obviously. I think he's probably going to get the vast majority of the carries, and then they'll use Fred Jackson in third down situations where pass protection becomes an issue. That's like the big thing for him. He's a great pass protector, good in the pass game. So I imagine him on those kind of things, and then in the hurry up type offense. And then I think that they'll try and just get Thomas Rawls some carries in the game, like throughout, just on second and first down, and kind of just spell Marshawn a few times. And I think the goal would probably be 15, 20 carries for Lynch, 15 probably for Lynch, and then 8 to 10 for Rawls, and maybe 3 or 4 for Fred Jackson. I don't really know how they would imagine or would picture the breakdown, but I think obviously that Lynch will still be the lead guy and Rawls be his backup. So it'll be interesting to see how they break it down, because we haven't really had a situation where the backup has looked so good, and then Lynch has not necessarily looked that great this year so far, fighting off some injuries. And so early on they might actually, they might actually give him them equal carries this week, just to get Lynch back on the, the wagon.
Isn't that pretty scary thought as well? If the Seahawks, this week or last week lost because they couldn't close it out in the fourth quarter. But, if you've got 2 really good running backs back there, when you want to use Thomas Rawls, imagine, being able to bring in a Thomas Rawls in the fourth quarter, or, even having Rawls split the carries for 3 quarters, and then a fresh Marshawn Lynch gets to run the ball in the fourth quarter when you're trying to run the clock down or just trying to maybe score. That's going to be, that could end up being, they may have found something really valuable there in Thomas Rawls, and it's obvious that why they let go of Robert Turbin and Kristen Michael, who will be starting this week for the Cowboys.
Sounds like it. They have been alluding to that, so that'll be really fun to watch. Hopefully he plays well there.
I know that Lyle Collins has been inserted into the Cowboys starting lineup at left guard, and that's a pretty big, for the guy that was a big story on draft day, goes undrafted because of a murder investigation.
Crazy.
I guess I just can't say murder investigation about, an NFL player without giggling. It's just so ridiculous. But, obviously nothing has come of that would be concerning. It just
right. He was exonerated or whatever.
Yeah. So let's go now to our interview with Will Brinson of CBSSports.com. And then we can just call him in a couple minutes.
Okay, I'm calling now.
Okay.
Hold on. But he said 20 minutes, Kenny, just so you know.
Okay.
I think he's traveling, so he's got limited amount of time.
Sounds good.
Okay, calling now. Something happened. Dropped out. That was weird. What the heck? The number's not working.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's great. Let's try it one more time, I guess. Hold on. What the heck? Hold on.
Okay.
I'm emailing him.
All right, I'm step away for a minute.
Okay, I think he gave me the wrong number, so I'm gonna try it again, Kenny. You ready?
Yeah.
I think he gave me the wrong number, so I'm trying it again.
Oh.
That's him. Okay, it's dialing.
Hello.
Hey, Will, it's Danny.
Hey, what's up, man?
Not much. No worries, no worries. I think we got one digit wrong on the number the first time. So I'm here with Kenny again.
Hey, Will.
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Can't complain. Sitting at a drawbridge.
Hey,
right,
you
well-
can complain.
That's what I'm doing. I just pulled up.
Well, we'll keep it quick and sweet. So why don't we just get right into it?
All right. We're here with Will Brinson of CBSSports.com, and he also is a Carolinian. So, or a Carolinian, I guess maybe be the correct term, to talk to about us. To talk to us about the Carolina Panthers as we preview the game in Seattle against the Seahawks this Sunday. Will, how's it going today?
It's going well. I think it is. I am a North Carolinian
North Carolinian
pronunciation, but a Carolinian is fine too. And I'm not even in North Carolina. I'm in Florida.
Okay. Yeah, my favorite Carolinian is Petey Pablo. For the Panthers this year, they are 4-0. I guess the big thing is, the Seahawks and the Panthers have quite a rich recent history of playing each other, it seems, every year. The Seahawks luckily have been 5-0 under Pete Carroll in those games. What do you think has been the biggest problem for Carolina? 3 of those games came at home in Carolina. What do you think has been the biggest problem for the Panthers that they haven't been able to overcome in those games against the Seahawks?
Well, I would say primarily the problem is that the Seahawks are very good. But, I think there is something. I'm just going to spitball this anecdotally because I don't have the game scores from those games in front of me. But I would say that almost all of those games were close or came down to a late possession. Because I think, and the reality is, they're not they're not carbon copy teams, but I think that the Seahawks and Panthers are similar in terms of their blueprint for how they build their teams. Basically, they want to have a running attack. They have mobile quarterbacks that they would like to become better in the pocket. One has, maybe both of them have, and they play defense, and they've got these. They understand that. It's interesting the differences too, because Carolina, up until this year, this is the first Panthers team, in my opinion, in the past since Dave Gettleman got there, or since Luke Kuechly got there is a better way to put it, that they have had a really good secondary. Typically speaking, their secondary is kind of cast-offish, and it's improved by the fact that their front seven attacks, and this secondary, I think, it's probably the best one they've had, but which makes them very different from Seattle in that respect, because the Seahawks have a good secondary. You go back and look at what happened in the playoff game. It was third downs from Russell Wilson, and I think the 2 years before that, it was primarily just big plays down the field that maybe the secondary couldn't contain. And I would expect that this game will be close. I was surprised that the line was as big as it was. I think 6.5.
Yeah.
Given that the Panthers are, coming off a bye and played the Seahawks close, have a good defense, and the Seahawks have struggled relative to their talent.
You mentioned the Panthers secondary, and did anyone in Carolina see Josh Norman being Josh Norman so far?
Well, I think that Panthers fans believed he had the talent to be this good. But, a lot of it has always been the fact that Norman was kind of considered a knucklehead. I think even this preseason, you could go back and look, and he's consistently been in Ron Rivera and Sean McDermott's doghouse his entire career. He fell in the draft. I think there were some. He had the athletic upside that people loved, but there were some. I don't want to call them character concerns, because I think that phrase gets maybe overused in today's day and age, and maybe maturity concerns is a better way to put it. But I don't think that anyone knew for sure that Josh Norman would be this good. However, everybody knew that he had the talent to be this good. It was all about harnessing it, and I think that's a fairly common theme when it comes to highly talented NFL players.
Speaking of highly talented NFL players, it doesn't seem like the Panthers have any at wide receiver right now. The top one obviously is Ted Ginn.
Ted Ginn takes umbrage to that,
sir. He's a talented guy. I mean, as opposed to me, for sure. There's not another player. There's not another receiver. Greg Olsen is the leading receiver in terms of yards, but no one else besides Ted Ginn has more than 73. Is there anyone at all that the Seahawks should be scared of besides Olsen and Ginn as far as the receiving goes?
Absolutely not. I mean, no, it's really true. I think Carolina is in a weird position because, and again, you go back and look at the Seahawks and the Panthers and the way they build their rosters and the similarities there. They don't invest a ton of money in the wide receiver position. Seattle has, gone out and traded for Jimmy Graham. But by and large, the guys that they're operating with are the players that they drafted. Doug Baldwin's had a chip on his shoulder for 40 years about the quality of the Seahawks receiving core, and nobody respects him. That's great. I think Carolina is designed the same sort of way. Obviously, you saw Dave Gettleman go out and spend two high picks on receivers after letting Steve Smith go. One of them, unfortunately, was for Kelvin Benjamin 2 years ago. He had a huge year as a rookie, productivity-wise, maybe not efficiency-wise, and then tore his ACL before the season, so he won't be playing. And I think the offense would be very different if he did play. And then, of course, the other guy is Devin Funchess, who was kind of similar to Kelvin Benjamin in terms of what people expected, in terms of maybe a little bit raw coming out of college. And he just they haven't forced him on the field, which I think is really honestly the way to go, because if you force a guy like that on the field and he doesn't succeed, people are quick to call him a bust. But the short answer to your question is no. There's not anybody that's going to scare the Seahawks in terms of wide receivers. It's almost a benefit to the Panthers. They don't have to worry about beating the secondary because they don't have anybody to beat them with. Cam Newton's accounted for every single one of their offensive touchdowns this year.
And one of the things that was much maligned during the offseason was the Panthers' offensive line. How have they played this year?
Much better. I want to say that somebody pointed this out to me, but Pro Football Focus has them at second overall. I think.
Wow.
I will say that Pro Football Focus is, for their numbers, graded every offensive lineman positively except for Michael O'Hare, who they grade as one of the worst left tackles in the NFL.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. Well, right. And and he's an upgrade. That's the crazy part. But yeah, I think the Panthers' offensive line has been a big surprise, and that was kind of one of the things when you knew what Dave Gettleman was going to do when he was building out this roster. He wasn't going to go out and spend big in free agency, and the consequences of that for a lot of people, is for any team that does it, is that sometimes you're going to suffer at certain positions, and you have to hope that your coaching can cause improvements over the talent that you have. And I think they've been able to do that from an offensive line standpoint. And if you're the Panthers fans, you have to be really happy. One of the big differences too is that, Cam Newton has been healthy this year. He didn't come into 2014 healthy at all. Was banged up coming in. And I think a healthy Cam Newton allows the Panthers to do much more from a protection standpoint and an offensive standpoint, not just because, healthy is better, but because if you have Cam and he's healthy, you don't have to worry about, you can kind of use him to attack offensively, and you don't have to worry about shifting your protections to make sure Cam's not taking shots. He's big enough where he can handle the workload in terms of hits, and I think that they've been improved because of that as well. Mobility for Cam is going to make that offensive line look smart.
One of the as far as Luke Kuechly goes, is he expected to play? Is he expected to be at 100%? No, not being held back. And what's the difference on defense? How much big of an impact do you expect him to have when he does return at full strength?
Yeah, he's going to be. I would expect that. I think, and this is not not any hashtag sources or anything. But my understanding is that they could have played him last week and before the bye, when they played Tampa Bay, and decided that it was better off for Kuechly's well-being in the long term of the Panthers as a team, franchise, and as a team this year, if they sat him for the extra week and then gave him 10 days to rest. You give him the bye to rest, and he's coming back healthy. You don't risk a major chance of a re-aggravation. So I think he'll probably be pretty close to 100%. Clearly a very bad concussion because he missed a lengthy amount of time. But kudos to the Panthers for approaching it the way they did. I would expect AJ Klein did a great job in Luke Kuechly's stead. They probably have no disrespect to the Seahawks, but the Panthers probably had the best linebacking core in the league between Klein as a backup, Thomas Davis, who secretly was better than Kuechly down the stretch last year, playing an incredibly high level given his age and his injury history, and then Shaq Thompson, who they added. So I think with what they have in place up front, I would expect Kuechly to be a big difference maker, particularly if you're talking about against a team that is likes to try and dominate you in the run game. I mean, that's Kuechly's bread and butter. If he can get a hole because of if a gap's created by the defensive front four penetrating, then Kuechly's going to find the guy with the ball.
Yeah, I feel like part of the new NFL concussion protocol should be Will Smith has to go up to every team doctor and go, "You tell the truth. You tell the truth."
That movie is going to be. I mean, I feel like we haven't seen any more publicity from it after that initial surge, which may tell you all you need to know.
I don't know. I go to the theater. I go to the movie theaters a lot, and I've seen it about 10 times. So I see the trailer plenty still. I don't know how many other people caught that reference.
I don't ever go to the theaters.
You're killing the American economy. We got to go see movies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You mentioned Shaq Thompson. Obviously, people around here, big fan of his. And it was cool to see him get drafted in the first round. How has he played? I know that it was kind of a controversial pick for them because he wasn't projected to necessarily start immediately. What's his role been, and how has he played?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shaq Thompson played really well. I mean, you guys know, if you saw him play in college, Shaq Thompson is not, he's like the opposite of Luke Kuechly in terms of, he's not going to come in and be this like he's an athlete who just makes he's a playmaker.
Yeah.
I almost and I think that the idea, and I said this at the time, there was this notion that, well, the Panthers don't have a wideout, they need wideout help and they need offensive line help. How can you dare, draft a guy who plays linebacker when you already have Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis? Like,
right.
well, you can start more than two of them. And this is a guy who makes plays. And Dave Gettleman, to his credit, because I really think that there are a lot of people out there who say this and then don't actually do it. Dave Gettleman, to his credit, actually does draft best player available. And I think, I think it's worth praising people who are willing to do that because, we always say it's like, you always hear people who, leading up to the draft, it's like, well, who are you going to take? It's like, well, we're going to take best player available. And then the draft starts and they nest themselves and they take the top guy on the board because he's dead, or they draft for a position of need. And I think that Gettleman has done a really good job of going best player available. And I think it's paid off. You put a guy like Shaq Thompson in there who can make plays.
The Panthers have won 8 straight regular season games and 9 of 10 overall, the one loss being to the Seahawks. But a lot of people would say that those wins that they've had have not been that impressive as far as strength of schedule goes. Just how far do you expect the Panthers to go this season? Do you think that they with the fact that they are winning, they're beating everyone that they're supposed to, do you expect them to be able to win the division? And, how good do you think they can be right now?
Well, I think one of the things we've seen so far this year in the NFL is that the teams that are coming out hot, and this probably happens more than we recognize, but, you look at the teams that are coming out and playing well, and primarily it's teams with consistent roster with a lack of roster turnover. And, I think Seattle would actually be in that mix, except for the fact, like, Seattle lost on the road to Green Bay, St. Louis, and how am I talking?
Cincinnati.
And Cincinnati, yeah. So Seattle lost like 3 really good teams on the road. Otherwise, would probably be, and I get the offensive line isn't playing well, but I think that they're a team that would have a much better record and has an easier schedule coming up, and they fall under that consistent category. But you look at the Bengals, very consistent, fantastic roster up and down. The Patriots, of course, the Packers, especially on that offensive line with Aaron Rodgers, and the defense adds consistency and looks like the best unit they've had in a while. And then the Panthers, I try to tell people, even when Kelvin Benjamin went out, that look, losing your number one receiver is a huge blow always.
Mm-hmm.
But this Panthers team isn't going to change that much. I mean, they're still going to be methodical and borderline plotting on offense. They're gonna take this. They're gonna try to be efficient in the red zone where as much as they can, limit the number of possessions and play really good defense. And they've had they've struggled offensively in the passing game to put up decent numbers, and they've struggled in the run game, and they've still managed to pull out wins. And so I think you can say, well, they haven't played anybody. Well, you know what? Like 3/4 of the NFL is terrible. I mean, it's wild. Like the Bears.
True.
The Bears were consensus the worst team in the league 2 weeks ago, and right now the Bears are a half game out of a wild card spot in the NFC. So I don't worry too much about strength of schedule. This is a tough little stretch for the Panthers, with the Packers and the Seahawks and the Colts. But and the Eagles too. But of course, the Eagles and the Colts don't look as good as they did preseason. I think the Panthers are capable of winning the NFC South. They're just as capable of winning that division as the Falcons are. I think they can play well with the Falcons, and I think the Panthers have experience. Cam Newton's gone to the playoffs and won a game, and I think I think it tends to bode fairly well for Carolina's chances that they play in that division. The Saints look terrible. The Buccaneers are a little frisky with Jameis Winston. The Falcons certainly are playing really well, but I don't think that they're head and shoulders better than Carolina. And I would think that Carolina is the lead dog right now to worst case be one of the NFC wildcards.
If you had to put a score guess out here this week, what would you say? Do you think the Panthers are going to win? You think it's going to be a close one?
Let's see. What's the line? 6.5. I think I got the Panthers covering. So, I think it'll be. God, didn't we get like 2 years ago? We got like a 13-9 game
Yeah.
in Charlotte. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to feel like both of these teams. I mean, just the way they run offense. What's the total number of offensive plays run in this game? I mean, it just can't be that high.
Like 60.
I think. Yeah, exactly. 35. I think it's definitely a situation where it's going under 40 total points easily, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's under 35. And I think just the fact that it is going to be low scoring, and because of the way you don't really have a whole lot of explosion on offense. The Seahawks are still trying to figure. They don't know if Marshawn is going to play. I think he was limited on Thursday, and you don't have the offensive line and clicking in Seattle. So I would expect both teams will be careful with the ball. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something in the range of 13-9 again. I'll say 17-13. Seahawks beat the Panthers.
Well, if the Panthers are down 17-0 in the fourth quarter, don't fret. There's still plenty of hope left for Carolina to go. We want to thank Will for coming on. Will, where can people find you online?
CBSSports.com. We do a Thursday night show, and I write things about football there, and on Twitter @WillBrinson.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully no injuries this week, and good luck.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, Will. All right. Well, I mean, I think I actually kind of agree with him in terms of the prediction. I think it's going to be kind of one of those sloggy games where no one wants to run plays. Like both of these teams kind of have the same strategy on offense kind of thing, and try and limit the amount of possessions, limit the amount of plays. And so, yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's probably going to be something in that area. What would you think on that?
I'm gonna disagree. This is a segment we called Button Heads. Watch out, here I come. No, like I said before, the games in Seattle have not been close. It's only been the games in Carolina that have been close. Obviously, I know that the game in Seattle last year was close for much of it in the playoffs. With Cam Chancellor jumping over the line, that was that game. It really was close until there was an interception return for a touchdown that kind of blew it open. But I don't think that the Carolina Panthers have an offense. So, I know that, even if this is Cam Newton's best season, he's still a pretty average quarterback in my mind. I know he's very talented and he's got dual threat and he doesn't have a lot to work with, but regardless of the reasons, if he doesn't have anything to work with, that's a problem. So I don't think that Jonathan Stewart is a very good running back, or maybe the offensive line can't block for him. Either way, Carolina is, they're sixth in scoring, but, they haven't really impressed me that much, again, playing the teams that they've played.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be a good test for them, and it'll be, a good opportunity for Seattle. Much like with the Chicago Bears game, to
get back on track.
Yeah, and really prove that they are, they're going to be fine.
Right.
And then that being said, just like with the Detroit Lions game, they could also come out of it looking very not fine.
Yeah.
And the Bengals. But the Detroit Lions game, I think that win over Detroit was almost worse than their loss to the Bengals. Because they were at home on Monday Night Football, and they probably should have lost if not for one amazing play.
That was a game they should have actually. They really should have destroyed them. They just blew so many chances, and they had 2 fourth quarter turnovers, and so
it was pathetic.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I do think the Seahawks will win. I picked the Seahawks this week, and I feel pretty confident about that. But just the way the Seahawks play, I think it's kind of just one of those things where it's going to be sloggy, and people are going to be stressed out about it. I don't see it being a blowout.
And when you say you pick them, that means that you picked them on Deep Balls, the Pick'em podcast with you and Jackson Bevins.
That's correct. Yes. Thanks for the plug.
Go listen to that. Also, me and Rob Staten, 3000 NFL Mock Draft. Also, is the Cigar Thoughts a podcast yet?
No, I think it's still, we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. So right now it's just make sure you go follow that or find that on Field Goals, the Cigar Thoughts podcast. This week it was Jackson, Matt Nichols, and I, or me. And then I always screw up those, man.
What's the rule?
You take out the other two people, and then that's what you would say. So this week it was me.
Oh, okay.
This week it was I. No, but yeah, so it was Jackson, Matt, and me. But anyway, you know what I mean. So yeah, those are the other 3 podcasts that we have at Field Goals.
Yeah.
And
This
then
is
of course,
KND Radio.
Yep, and then of course on Sunday afternoon, we do a quick reaction podcast as well. That's been doing pretty well. People have liked that from what we've heard, and so
yeah,
you tune in for that as well.
Yeah, that's the game is at 1 p.m. Pacific, so that means look out for that around between 4 and 5. The instant reaction podcast, people have been liking that. Yeah, and just final thoughts on the Panthers. It really is like when you look at Josh Norman. This is a guy, there's always talk about who's the best corner in the NFL. It's a trending topic consistently 24/7. And Josh Norman may be that guy right now. According to Pro Football Focus, quarterbacks are 15 of 35 when throwing at him. That's a catch rate of 42.9%. They've gained 129 yards, so that's 8.6 yards per catch. They're only 37 yards after the catch, 1 touchdown allowed, 4 interceptions, and that's only in 4 games, and 2 pass deflections, as well as 2 return touchdowns. And this is a guy that was a 5th-round pick out of Coastal Carolina in 2012. Only played in 7 games his second year, was missed some time last year, and is now obviously playing like the best corner in the NFL. Do you have any thoughts at all on Josh Norman?
It was interesting how he was saying that he was kind of thought of as a knucklehead. It reminded me of Thurhold Simon a little bit, because right now he's obviously out for the year, but he's shown flashes during his first couple seasons with the Seahawks where he's like, wow, this guy could be really good, But then he's also kind of a knucklehead a little bit on the field, like getting really egregious, like stupid penalties or, whatever. And then obviously in the playoffs he got tore up, and that potentially could have been due to an injury, but it could have been, maybe other reasons as well. Like he's just maybe not very good. We don't really know yet. I tend to be a little bit bullish still on him. I think that, he's still going to be a good player for the Seahawks. It's kind of like how it took Byron Maxwell probably about till his 3.5 year to be anything good for the Seahawks. I think it might be kind of the same track for him. But that was what it reminded me of when he was talking about him. I kept, uber talented in their physical sense, but then kind of just, it took him a while to get going and become a pro, quote, a pro. So I haven't watched Josh. I don't know Josh Norman's story real in depth. So he was kind of a surprise to me this year. But that makes a lot of sense. But what Will was saying about, kind of how he just kind of was a knucklehead for the first few years, like the Golden Tate track.
Right. And I think one of the things of any great defense, you want to have talent at all 3 levels, something the Seahawks have in their secondary, obviously, and then up front tremendously with Bennett and Averill, and then in the middle with Wagner and Wright. And that's something that the Panthers now, when you look at it, if Josh Norman, he could be the key, because I don't really know. I don't think most people know who their safeties are, Kurt Coleman and Roman Harper. I think probably lacking something there. The other cornerbacks. But then you get in the middle, you've got Kuechly and Thomas Davis. Up front, you've got Star Latulele, Kawan Short, and Charles Johnson. So they now have talent at all 3 levels. I still think that guys like Shaq Thompson and Coney Ely have to get better if they're going to be, great. And I don't think that, there's a lot of other things going on, but it's enough for them to have a very good defense. I just think that the Seahawks will win because the Panthers have to come across the country, play in Seattle, a place that they haven't lost very much in the last 3 years, and win a game with basically with no offensive weapons outside of pretty much just the one besides Cam Newton. So that's my pick, and that ends the segment Butting Heads. So that's this week's podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. Go to ballardagency.com or call them at 425-454-3510 and tell them that Field Goals sent you. And anything else we should tell them?
Follow us at, you can follow me at Field Goals online and then on Twitter, and then obviously follow Kenny at Kenneth Arthur S. He also writes for Rolling Stone and Sports on Earth, so you can follow his stuff there. Follow us on Facebook if you're not on Twitter, because I know a lot of people don't do Twitter, which is weird to me, but
we need to push that Facebook.
Yeah, everyone's on Facebook, so
right,
that's big. So yeah, those are the places where you can follow us.
Yeah, so do that, and Facebook, like the Facebook page, and come back on Sunday for the instant reaction show after the Seahawks, in parentheses, hopefully, end parentheses, beat the Panthers.
Exactly.